Typical late August weather across much of the United States. Showery rains here and there, otherwise very warm and somewhat humid conditions in the parts of the Northeast and Northern Mid-Atlantic states. We'll see how long that holds on. And we will have that and so much more coming up. Northern Mid-Atlantic states. We'll see how. There we go. Coming up tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, where the internet just went down again. Are you there, Mr. Rayo? Hold on. Just wondering if you were still there.
I'm here.
All right, hang on a second. All right. Well, let's try this. Oh, God. The world I live in. The Joe and Joe Weather Show brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. And, of course, on this anniversary of Hurricane Andrew back in 1992, just think ahead about the fact that if there is a tropical storm or hurricane, you want to make sure you've got the necessary equipment to get you through. That includes generators, pumps, batteries, flashlights, etc. And, of course, in the event that we don't have any tropical systems, you might think about maybe getting your yard back in shape with mulch and topsoil, everything here at Omni. 631-756-1125 is the phone number, and the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. 30th anniversary of Andrew, Joe.
Yes. And, all right, seems like things have settled down here. A little bit of internet issues. I was figuring an end around today, and I found what was an open wireless channel that maybe the traffic on it is a bit, how shall we say, less busy. So hopefully this will stabilize and we can go forward. So why don't we just do that right off the bat? And I've got the surface maps. Joe Rayo will be monitoring the chat board tonight as he always does with such great fluidity. And if you have any questions or comments, by all means, pass them along. This is got the surface map back, Joe, from 2 a.m. Sunday, August 23rd, 1992, on the days when they used to write on the surface map when there was a tropical storm or a hurricane, and you could see it there on the rights, the upper right there. Hurricane, HURCN, Andrew in quotes, at 25/7, 72/7, which was the NHC. Actually, that's the NMC, the old NMC, the National Meteorological Center estimated position. And see how it's all wrapped up with a million isobars. There was that was such an interesting storm on so many levels. One thing is that it was very small in terms of its diameter. The other thing is that it was like an absolute buzzsaw when in terms of the signature that was on the satellite from this.
Yeah, so a lot of people seem to forget that after it cut its way literally through south central Florida, the storm reemerged into the Gulf of Mexico and then did additional significant damage to the folks who lived along the Gulf coastal states. So it was a double punch here, so to speak, from that storm. But notice also, Joe, the name Andrew, the letter A, and they had to wait until now, at this time in August, to see their very first tropical cyclone. But as we've said so often, it doesn't matter if you have a very active hurricane season, because in those years, sometimes you don't see a single storm that impacts the continental United States, or you can have only a few, or you can have them spaced out. And so long as just one of them makes landfall on the United States, that becomes a very significant and a very memorable storm. And Andrew certainly was a memorable storm.
Well, from the point that it actually, now the surface plot map's a little off here because some of this, you can see there's an L, or just an L with one isobar. Obviously, that was not the case. It looks like this was more of an automated plot of some sort on this particular map. And then by 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Monday the 24th, it was moving off the southwest coast of Florida. It was at 25.5 and 81.5, which is right pretty close to Key West. And then on its way, and as you said, moved up into the Gulf of Mexico. Uh, Never did get back to Category 5 status, but it did manage to hold on as a Category 3. 948 millibars was what was measured here. This is at Tuesday morning when it was at 27.2. So this is Tuesday the 25th at 27.2, 88.4. 949 millibars. Oftentimes, with systems like this, when they make that initial landfall, they never quite get back to that. They sort of change characters sometimes. It's not that dissimilar to Hurricane Betsy in 1965. In that, but the notable difference is that Betsy didn't become a, a, a formidable hurricane until it was in the Gulf of Mexico on its way to New Orleans. But it took a similar track where it went just north of the Bahamas, and it looked like it was actually going to turn out to sea when it turned southwestward and moved across southern Florida, then came out the other side, and then headed west northwest and then northwest toward the Louisiana coast. And you see it here on the surface map. Again, some of this is an automated plot, and some of these maps are more hand drawn. But finally, on Wednesday, the 26th, we had Andrew making landfall somewhere. It was west of New Orleans, southwest of Lafayette, and coming ashore. But that had been the first time in quite a long time that there had been a Category 5 hurricane that made landfall in the United States. They just don't, fortunately, they don't. Those landfalls don't happen too often.
Yes.
You don't want Category 5 hurricanes making landfall on the U.S. Every season because that would just not play well.
Yeah, but you look at that was the A storm, and for us, we've only gone as far in the alphabet so far this year as C, and we're still waiting for D, and we're still waiting for the first tropical cyclone, named tropical cyclone, to occur in August. We have not had any named tropical cyclones since the early part of July. It's been amazingly quiet.
Yep. So as far as at the moment, might as well bring up the Hurricane Center's forecast here. Give me a moment to put it back on the screen. I know, by the way, I'm still having issues. The good news is that I found out today that the broadband line is supposed to be coming in a couple of weeks. I called them up today and they told me that I'm scheduled for sometime during the month of September. So that should put an end to all this suffering once and for all. And believe me, nobody's more frustrated than me over this. Tropical wave moving off the African coast, 20% chance in the next 5 days. Environmental conditions could support some slow development. And there's a lead wave that once it gets into the Caribbean, it could be more conducive for some slow development there. Also, 20% in the next 5 days. And I'll just bring up let's bring up a satellite image of the
While you're doing
Caribbean.
that, Joe, excuse me. While you're doing that, let me address a comment on the chat board by Robert Hill. Robert Hill says, have weird feeling this winter with weakening La Nina and grand solar minimum conditions, early stages, severe winter. Robert, let me point something out to you. So far, and there have been quite a few people who are, uh, disciples of the fact that when the sun is inactive, that we have colder than normal weather. Well, while the last 2 or 3 solar maxima, the periods when the sun supposedly was be at its peak in terms of sunspots and solar flare, the last 2 or 3 cycles have been pretty much below normal. This particular cycle that we are into right now is more active than the last two or three combined. If you're thinking about solar minimum, if you're thinking about low solar activity, I have news for you. It ain't happening this time around. This time around, the sun has become very active. We've had quite a few significant solar flares in recent days and weeks, and the peak or the maximum is expected to be sometime in the year 2025. So the sun activity is increasing far more than a lot of the people who were suggesting that we'd be at a low phase of solar activity were suggesting. No, it's anything but. So if that be the case, and if there is any correlation between solar activity and climate, then this is bad news if you are hoping for colder, wintry type conditions. Because, as I said, the sun looks like it's waking up, or it has woken up, and it will only get more active in the months to come. And so the so called grand solar minimum doesn't seem like it's going to be happening anytime soon. So I would scratch that off the list for those who are looking for possible reasons why this winter might be exceptionally cold, exceptionally stormy, or snowy. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. As far as La Nina, they've been saying that it was going to weaken and end for many, many weeks now. And they just keep stretching this out. Joe, the La Nina seems to be hanging in now, may hang in right until the beginning of this upcoming winter. So
Right.
it's
Well,
what we think we know. What we think we know, sometimes we don't really know. You know?
yeah. Uh, my problem with those with that type of stuff is that it assumes that the entire world rotates around your particular zip code. So, you're not going to have some sort of event that is going to mean that the entire northern half of the world is going to have below normal temperatures and above normal snowfall for the upcoming winter season. You understand what I'm getting at here? Someone sitting in New York says, "Oh, there's a grand or any geographic point. Oh, the grand solar minimums means we're going to have a terrible winter." Well, when was the last time that you've ever seen it experienced where the entire country, from coast to coast and from border to border, was experiencing a 3 month long period of below to well below normal temperatures and above to well above normal snowfall? It doesn't happen that way. So for one spot of the country is going to be very cold, one other spot in the United States is probably not going to be very cold, and it may be just the opposite. That's just kind of how it works. That's my problem with a lot of this stuff. It's very it's very personal, and people make it very personal and very self-centered. It's all in my geography. It's all in my zip code, and it just doesn't work that way.
That's absolutely true. It is very, very unusual when you see the same kind of weather from coast to coast. Usually, if the east is cold, the west is warm, or vice versa. So it doesn't seem to make much difference uh, whether it's a solar minimum or a La Nina. And as we have seen so far this summer, there have been some places that have been bone dry. Case in point, my house. But meantime, there are places that have had far too much water, like we saw this morning in portions of Mississippi, a couple of days ago in Dallas, Texas, and earlier in the week and last week over Arizona and New Mexico.
And
Some
then
places
and
did a
and
lot,
then
and
there
other
was
places did very
right.
little.
Then there was the clobbering in St. Louis back a few weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah. So
So
you see, nobody gets everything at the no one, not everybody gets the same kind of weather.
no, not at all. All right, let's go to the U.S. Satellite loop. I'll make this a little bit bigger. Hang on a second. And turned out to be a pretty nice day across much of the Northeast, Joe. The loop's got that August look to it, where there's a lot of these little Q popping up here and there in the areas where skies were more sunny than anything else. It's a lot of clouds across the Gulf states. Some rain right along the immediate Gulf Coast, where in some places it was especially heavy. Also, you're seeing clouds up in the southwest, and doesn't look like we're going to have to worry about.
Something we found on the web. According to Vadan2.com, heavy clouds are formed in the sky when the southwest monsoon winds invade with a lot of moisture from the sea. Did that answer your question?
Alexa, stop. I don't know, Joe. You triggered Alexa.
I did. Oh, good
You
Lord.
must have said something that this also happens on our computer upstairs with Siri. We don't understand why Siri suddenly kicks in, and neither one of us has said anything to Siri. Now you must have did something, or Alexa must have interpreted something that was her name, and then when you started talking about heavy clouds, she had to join in the conversation.
Well, maybe she wants to be part of the show.
Maybe.
Right, but she doesn't get paid though.
No.
No. Um, yeah. So anyway, without me having to set her off again, uh, doesn't look like we're going to see much in the way of rain in the next 7 days. However, uh, maybe on Friday there's a weather front that's going to come on through in the Northeast and into the northern Mid-Atlantic states, but particularly for New England, maybe down to northern New Jersey and northeastern Pennsylvania, might be a little. I thought maybe there might be a little bit of severe weather risk. It's kind of where SPC is going with regards to severe weather risk at the end of the week.
Yeah, and Mark Di saying that aside from the anniversary of Andrew, also on this date in 2017, the eclipse. No, you're off by a couple of days, Mark. The eclipse was August 21st, and this is obviously August the 24th. So the eclipse was not on this day, but you were close. You were close.
Close is good. We could take close. All right, radar. Let's take a look at what's going on the radar tonight. And there's a nice. Let me give this a quick refresh here. There is hardly anything going on up and down the East Coast, with the exception of northern Maine, where we see a few showers. But in Alabama, down to the Florida Panhandle, we've got a lot of flash flood warnings up there. Also on the west coast of Florida, the western half of Florida, seeing showers and thunderstorms lining up. Looks like right along up I-75, and a few scattered thunderstorms in central Louisiana. Down in South Texas, we've got a few scattered storms. You can see the activity in the Southwest, and quite a few flash flood warnings and some severe thunderstorm warnings in Southern California. Don't see that too often, but they're getting that monsoon action. Not near the coast, not near San Diego, not near LA, but we're talking in the hot part of the Southwest, down around Palm Springs. Even some showers again up and around Las Vegas, northern Arizona, a number of flash flood warnings there, and those showers extend on up into Utah and into parts of Wyoming and Montana.
And they still have a certain percentage of drought out there, Joe, out in the desert Southwest. After all of the rain that has fallen in recent weeks and months, they still are in the deficit category in terms of moisture. I mean, they've made a good comeback, but you got to understand, from what I saw back myself with my own two eyes back in May when Bernard and I were out there, it was just like dry as a bone. So it really is taking much of the summer to alleviate this severe or extreme drought that they had out in the desert Southwest.
Yeah, I mean, we saw for all these weeks of rain that's been going on out there. You still have a lot of areas that were listed up as extreme drought.
Right, absolutely so.
All right. So the Storm Prediction Center, most of the risk tonight is across the upper Mississippi Valley, west through parts of the northern plains and on up into Montana and Idaho. Otherwise, you can see how nice and quiet it is. throughout from central New England and upstate New York down into North Carolina and west across the Ohio Valley into the central and southern plains. The SPC folks for tomorrow not really showing much of anything here in the Northeast. General thunderstorms, mid-Atlantic, southeast across the Gulf states, also from the Great Lakes to the middle Mississippi Valley, up and down the Rockies. And then they have this for Friday with the weather front going by. They've got the marginal risk from northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, north and east through all of New England. Now, remember, marginal risk to me is isolated severe thunderstorms. So you might have some scattering of thunderstorms around, and there might be one or two of or three of those thunderstorms in the risk zone that could be severe. This does not look like it would be a widespread severe weather event.
No, in fact, my assumption would be if you were to put this on a percentage basis, probably like what, 20%, 10 to 20% for a marginal risk area of seeing severe weather, or
Yeah, I thought it was
or
5 to 15.
I don't know. You know, slight. What is slight and what is
Slight
enhanced?
is marginal is marginal was what 2%, and slight risk is between 2 and 15,
I wish they had
and
they have in
enhanced is 15 to 30.
the lower right hand corner of each of these maps gives you the categorical outlook legend showing you the colors. I wish they would also add the percentages so that people would understand what, let's
Well,
say,
let's.
marginal means as opposed to, slight or
Well,
that.
yeah. Here's the probabilistic. It's 5% is marginal risk. Okay,
Okay,
so that's 5%. Yeah, actually, if you look, there is a legend on the bottom. Slight risk is 15. Enhanced is 30. Um, then there's what's after enhanced? Moderate.
yeah, I think so.
That's 45. And then high risk is 60. And then there's a black box, which means I guess that's apocalyptic risk.
Yes, yes. If you're on the black box, you in big trouble.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, rainfall, and it ain't gonna be much. But just looking at days 1 through the next 3 days, so this encompasses Friday. So this is where we have some uh, a tenth to a quarter of an inch being indicated from New Jersey into southern New England, and then you see those heavier amounts up in northern New England, up in up into upstate New York, northern Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, half to 3/4. 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half plus along the Gulf Coast. The Southwest, it's kind of tailed back a little bit. Some pockets of a half to 3/4 of an inch, but rain's lightened up a bit there. Also across the northern plains and into the western lakes. The 7-day rainfalls here, which takes us now to next Wednesday night, several inches or more along the Gulf Coast and in Florida and in parts of, oh, that's it as far as the real heavy stuff is concerned. And 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a half up in northern New England, but look, still quite lacking though from central New England south into North Carolina. We're talking about basically a quarter of an inch of rain or less.
You're running you know what, Joe? You are running maybe about 2 minutes behind what I'm seeing on the screen. I'm still seeing um, the Storm Prediction Center information coming up. So
Yeah, I understand. I'm just bear with me because I'm trying to keep this a live stream from completely falling apart. I don't know what happens at 7:30 where we seem to lose. I have this internet connection that looks perfect. I set it up 45 minutes before the show tonight, and it was fine. And then as soon as 7:30 hits, it's all of a sudden the strength of the signal drops off here. I don't quite understand why it's doing that. So my apologies to everybody again watching the show tonight. Believe me when I tell you that this is not something that I'm planning on a nightly basis. It's very frustrating to me to not have everything work correctly, but I'm trying to hang on. So let's just roll through this. As far as the tropics are concerned, we do have the models waking up and showing some development next week in the tropical Atlantic. Maybe in time, if the GFS is right, there might be a named storm before the last day of the month coming off the African coast and over the Cabo Verde Islands. There's a lead wave that is at the moment approaching the Windward Islands. So when it gets into the Caribbean, the GFS wants to try and do something with that. It actually, on this particular run, it's got a little closed low over western Cuba that it drops into the southwest Gulf, and then suddenly something else forms and goes up into the west coast of Florida. Meanwhile, in the tropical Atlantic, you've got three other systems that it spins up as we on Labor Day. And by the way, j- just so we mentioned yesterday about the fact that Labor Days, you usually have one named storm running around somewhere. It is not a given that there has to be a named storm on Labor Day. I think if you go back, when you go back in history, there are Labor Days and Labor Day weekends where there are no named storms running around. That was particularly happened to quite a bit in the 70s and early 80s. So it's not a guarantee. It's just that when you look over the span of about 150 years, that particular date seems to, that those particular dates that surround the Labor Day holiday weekend, usually there's something running around someplace. But the big issue has been, and I'll bring up the moisture here. We've been talking about the fact that you've got all this Saharan dust that has been getting involved with all these with the tropical waves that have tried to move off the African coast, and they've just completely fallen apart. Well, that dry air is all part of that dry air is all also from the setup over Europe, where they've had the heat wave and that dry air was been funneled down deep into the tropics. That's getting cut off now, and we're finally seeing the intertropical convergence zone. If you see the blue area there off the African coast shifting northward, and that's going to allow for some of these systems to try and develop. Now, there's still dry air to the north of those storms, and sometimes that dry air can get involved and cut off development or not, but the conditions look to be a little more favorable for tropical cyclone formation as we go through next week and probably the week after that. I find it difficult to imagine that we were going to go through the entire hurricane season without seeing another named
No,
storm. I didn't think that
no,
was going to happen.
no, it's not. That's not. In fact, if you want to believe the GFS, the wave that will is predicted to come off of the African coast next Monday, they are forecasting some kind of a wave to develop and move off to the west, and that particular one, it looks like it will become a very potent system, probably even a hurricane if you take the GFS as face value. However, if you're hoping, and yes, we know that there are a few people out there who are crossing their fingers and hoping for a landfall along the eastern seaboard from one of these things. By the time the system gets within striking distance of the U.S. East Coast, say around the 8th or 9th of September, again, if you believe and take into account the model guidance at face value now, there's going to be some kind of an upper level trough moving along the eastern seaboard, which will serve to produce um, waves of low pressure along the eastern seaboard, but also would have a threat from the Atlantic away from the coast. So it may very well get interesting for all of you out there who are into tropical cyclones, tropical storms, hurricanes. It may very well get interesting for you during the first week or 10 days of September. But right now, it still looks like most of that activity will be held at bay and stay pretty well out to sea to our east. There is another system the GFS is forecasting down over the Caribbean, which may develop and try to come northward, but that too may be pushed away from the coast again by that same upper level trough during the latter part of the first week of September. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. In the meantime, It's going to be a very warm to hot day tomorrow and Friday. Maybe some late thunderstorms Friday evening. As we said, SPC's got severe weather risk. The weekend, Joe, I thought looked okay. On the warm and humid side, the flow a bit onshore-ish, which would maybe hold the temperatures down just a little bit, but still will mean middle to upper 80s inland and maybe upper 70s and low 80s along the coast. And maybe an isolated shower or thunderstorm on Saturday and then again on Sunday afternoon. I threw in the chance. Monday and Tuesday, we go more southwest. So I think we could probably see temperatures back up near or over 90. Maybe some thunderstorms late Monday, little upper trough going by. And then again, late on Tuesday, maybe a shower or thunderstorm. And then another cold front that comes through here along about Wednesday. And then the second half of the week, looks like maybe we get a high to our north and it'll be a little bit cooler. I don't know if you looked at the European, but the European's got a fairly deep trough in the northeast with a 546 thickness, believe it or not, down into southern New England by late next week.
You hear that, Renata? You hear that? Time to take the pool down late next week.
Right. Of course, the GFS does nothing like that. The GFS just kind of moves a trough along into southeastern Canada, and it keeps on going. The European drops, troughing into New England and sharpens it up. And you got a cutoff low in New Hampshire with a cool push down into the mid-Atlantic states, the westerlies all the way down into North Carolina. And, I don't know. To me, neither model seems to have a good handle on what's going to be happening in the longer term.
Oh, 546 thickness, you said?
It's a 546 thickness, yeah.
Oh.
Take a look on the surface map of the European. There's a 546 thickness. Let's see, I'm going to bring it up.
Well, what I'm looking at I'm looking at September 3rd, and I'm seeing on the 500 European that they've got a pretty significant cutoff low.
Yeah, well, look at the surface for that same time frame. There's the 546 thickness is Providence to Hartford to Poughkeepsie, or between, let's say, Kingston. That's where the 546 is. The 552 is Sandy Hook to about Scranton. 558 Atlantic City to, I don't know, Harrisburg.
Yeah, I see
it would make for a nice, cool, dry finish to the end of the end of next week if this were correct.
Yes, but that's only the opinion of the European.
Right.
We'll see.
The dear European.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. All right, so I'm just gonna see if I can figure this out here. Checking out.
Well, Christiapedia says the signal has been great for the last 20 minutes.
Really?
She's got four, not one, not two, not three, but four fingers crossed.
Oh, okay.
Icons, emojis. So.
All right. Well, why don't we see if we can? Well, I'm showing that my signal here is very weak, so I don't know. Maybe I'm maybe it's perking out better than I think.
Eat some spinach.
Hold on a second here. Well, let's see if I can get. Let's run through some Briller Jeopardy here. Let's try and get the chat. How far behind is the chat board tonight? Do we know?
The last message I see is from Joe Gaffney, and he says, long time to watch, and has like a hurricane swirl next to it. So I don't know when that was. Miss Spellerite said, was just reading up on why major hurricanes don't directly hit the northern neck of Virginia where the Potomac enters the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, you got to have a perfect. I mean, you have to have an absolutely perfect track for that to happen. It for where it is geographically, it just Either they go into the North Carolina coast or they go out, or they come straight up.
Well, no path is impossible. I mean, we said 10 years ago, oh, it's impossible to see a hurricane approach from the east and move almost straight west into, let's say, the New York tri-state area or central New Jersey. But guess what? It's exactly what Sandy did, and we all saw what happened there. So it just depends upon what the setup happens to be, and to get to bring a system, let's say, into the northern neck of Virginia, where the Potomac enters the Chesapeake Bay. It's not impossible, but certainly it is a setup that doesn't come along too often.
By the way, I want to acknowledge Anthony Orr hitting super chat tonight. Thank you, Anthony. And we had one other super chat hit tonight, which I can't see. Again, so this happened the other night. So my apologies to whoever that is.
I think it was our birthday boy, Steve Lapointe.
Oh, okay. But tonight? Oh, that's right. Happy birthday to Steve Lapointe. Yes, it is his birthday today. It's his birthday too.
Yes. I wish I had a voice. I would do a mock singing of Happy Birthday, but
you sound.
Joe. This morning I woke up with a coughing fit at about 5:30, and Renata sent me to the medicine cabinet so that I could take a swig of cough medicine. And then rather than go back to sleep, I went into the TV room, turned on the TV at 5:30, and I watched a rerun of Dragnet 1967.
Oh, good Lord.
With Jack Webb. And believe it or not, as we were getting into the opening minutes of the show, I said, I remember this. I remember this episode. And I could, in thinking about it, I remembered even a few lines or, it was an episode where it starts off with Jack Webb. It was dealing with hit and run drivers. And Jack Webb was at a restaurant with Gannon, his partner, and another cop. And he was showing photographs on the restaurant table of the sequence of what happens in the first second of a hit and run accident where two cars literally collide head on with each other. And, Jack Webb is saying 0.3 of a second. Your legs snap from the pressure. 0.5 of a second. Your neck swivels around. 0.6 of a second. And then finally he gets to 0.7 of a second. He says, at 0.7 of a second, that's it. You're gone. And you're not around to see what happens or experience the final 0.3 of that 1 second.
Lovely, isn't it?
Done in a way in a flat monotone voice that only Jack Webb could have done. The late great Jack Webb.
Yep.
And by the way, that was Dragnet 1967. And I said I remembered it when it was first on the NBC network. Dragnet was on Thursday nights at 9:30 p.m. I remember distinctly watching that episode when it first came on, and I said to myself, my God, that was, and I paused and said, that was 55 years ago.
I know.
Ouch. Ouch.
I know. It is, it's, I always, when I hear it's a certain star's birthday, and like, for example, I read yesterday that not too many days ago, it was Pat Priest's birthday. Remember Pat Priest?
Yes.
She was on the Munsters. She was the niece Marilyn, and she's like 86. Just insane. But that's 60 years ago. That's crazy.
I mean, if I was sitting in front of my TV set in 1967 and they were showing something, of course, television didn't exist way back in the early part of but 1967, relatively speaking to where we are now relative to 67, in 1967, 55 years earlier, would have been 1912.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. All right, let's try a little Briller Jeopardy with the folks on the chat board. So these are the questions that Scott actually used when he was touring up and down the New Jersey shore this summer. So this see if you can beat the record set on the Briller Jeopardy Road Tour. And so these were the exact questions used on the road. He's listed them the most they got right. Let's see if you can beat them. So the category is movies from 1970 to today. So it's folks on the chat board will get an opportunity to answer this. What are the current top 5 box office movies in the United States of all time? Not adjusted for inflation. Not adjusted for inflation. So the folks on the road on the road show got 3 of the 5. So you guys can see if you can guess. Can you guess at least 3? So we'll give everybody on the chat board a chance. So again, the question is the um, five highest grossing box office movies in the United States of all time, not adjusted for inflation. Okay. I'm going to tell you right now because I'm looking at these answers. I have not seen any of these 5 movies.
Well, I would think that the movie about the big boat is probably among the top 5, right?
And you are apparently wrong.
Wrong.
Yes.
Really?
Yes, really. You are
Wow.
apparently wrong. So I don't know. I'm seeing if anybody's on the board here. Uh, I know there's a bit of a delay, uh, which is most annoying, but what can I tell you here? Um, now that I'm not getting. Are you getting anybody else posting on the chat board? Because mine's like suddenly stopped.
Let's see. They're not even talking about the movie question, Joe. They're still talking about a good article on where hurricanes hit the Mid-Atlantic. Strong hurricane going into Chesapeake Bay would be devastating. Chuck Cardillo, it's so strange watching it now versus 40 years ago. So this is running pretty well behind, I think, by at least a couple of minutes, 2, 3 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm having the same issue here. So I haven't seen a new post up at all in the last 2 or 3 minutes. All right. You know what?
This is the drawback to doing questions for the chat board, because in situations like this, sometimes there's a delay of like 2 or 3 minutes.
Oh, Johnny Quest has just put up E.T. So the answer is wrong. E.T. is not. Christinapedia says Titanic, E.T., Star Wars, Jurassic Park, and Lord of the Rings. Okay, one of those is correct, but it's not. Um, Star Wars is generic, so there's a whole bunch of different Star Wars movies. So we'll give you partial credit for that. Dennis Cassia, Gone with the Wind. No, that is incorrect. Okay, incorrect. So if we're not adjusting the numbers for inflation, then these are gonna be movies that are probably most likely uh, in the last 15 or 20 years. Okay, because they are not adjusted for inflation. So Tom Clam says Ben-Hur and Gone with the Wind. No, that is incorrect. Jurassic Park is incorrect. Titanic is incorrect. Correct. Happy birthday, Steve Lapointe. Uh, no, Jaws is incorrect, Joe Gaffney. No, the answers are. So here are the answers. Wait a minute. Star Wars: The Force Awakens is number 1. Avengers: Endgame is number 2. Spider-Man: No Way
Avengers
Home is number 3.
Avengers Endgame?
Yes. Avatar is number 4, and the Black Panther is number 5.
I never would have gotten any of those.
No, I like I said, I haven't seen any of those. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's try this one. What top 5 actors have made the most money when adding up their cumulative box office. Okay, what actors have made the most money with their accumulated box office? I might have guessed one or two of these. The rest of them I wouldn't have guessed. One of them, by the way, is an animated. So it's the actor's voice.
I'm having a conversation with my wife who is claiming that the app on her iPad is faster. However, I'm checking and looking at the live chat on her faster app versus the chat board on my desktop here, and they're both moving, dear, at the same speed. She thought she was going to give me a heads up. Earlier it was ahead. She insists. All right. Well, it's not now. Avatar Avengers. Happy birthday, Steve LaPont from Arthur Cotman. Hello, Arthur. What, Joe? In terms of the actors or actresses, is Sylvester Stallone on that list?
Is Sylvester Stallone on that list? The answer is no. Sylvester Stallone is not on that list.
You would figure that after 6 Rockies, 4 Rambos, and now 2 or 3 Creeds, that he would be up on that list.
You would think. You would think. Well, look, I'm going to give the answers to this, and then I think we're going to wrap it up for tonight because still having internet issues here. So the number 5, I'll go backwards. So number 5, Tom Cruise, Top Gun Maverick.
Okay.
Number 4 is Tom Hanks for Toy Story 4. Number 3 is Scarlett Johansson for Avengers Endgame.
I never would have guessed Scarlett Johansson.
Well,
out of the Top Gun.
Since she's number 3, Robert Downey Jr. Is on the list. Also, the biggest movie was Avengers Endgame, and number 1, also Avengers Endgame, Samuel L. Jackson. So those were the top 5.
There you go.
And on that note, we're going to put an end to this show tonight. Of course, now I'm noticing that the internet signal has gotten a little better. I give up. I just toss my hands up in the air. Okay, let's try this one more time tomorrow night. So we'll see you then. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks for the super chat hits tonight from Anthony Orr and from Steve Lapointe. Happy birthday, Steve. Hope you had a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern Time. Night, everybody.
Good night, folks.